Hello, I'm Chris Bowserman, Chief Marketing Officer at Conexiom, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Alex Gounares, who is a proven track record as an innovator and disruptor in the market.
Thanks, Chris. Pleasure to be on this podcast. I'm Alex Gounares. I'm the technical managing director at Thrv. We're a private equity firm partnered with Luminate that specializes in buying B2B companies and driving growth with them through artificial intelligence. In my past background, I've been CTO at AOL, CTO at Microsoft. I was Bill Gates's technology advisor for many years, and I've done 9 startups of my own. Some of them worked and some of them didn't, which I think kind of gets a little bit to our topic today.
When you look at what can make or break a technology company today, how often is that really being able to innovate and catch the wave of a new technology like AI?
It's a fabulous question, Chris. It's been studied quite extensively. I'll start with a gentleman named Clayton Christensen, a Harvard Business School professor who passed away in recent years, but he just did some phenomenal work on this. And kind of his most famous bit is something called the innovator's dilemma. He studied various waves of innovation and disruption in industries. He found that it's incredibly rare for companies to survive these technology disruption waves. Companies like Digital Equipment, was very effective at disrupting IBM with their mini computers versus mainframes, but then Digital Equipment themselves got disrupted by the PC. It's rare to have companies like IBM that have been in the technology space for a long time. Even IBM is very different today than it was 30 years ago, let alone 60 years ago. So, the companies that do survive end up going through a lot of, reinvention, essentially. And his basic thesis for why it's challenging is when you have an existing business and there's a new disruptive technology, that disruptive technology oftentimes is a little goofy somehow, right? You can look at, backhoes versus the steam shovels was a famous example. This was quite a while ago, but the initial backhoes, they couldn't dig up very much. They, they were a little flaky, and the steam shovels, man, those suckers could just, scoop up a bunch of dirt and move it. When you go to a farm or a construction site these days, I'd be shocked if you found a traditional steam shovel. The cost efficacy of attaching a scooper to a regular tractor was just too high. So the steam shovel manufacturers poo-pooed these backhoes, saying, hey, they don't solve a big enough problem. And, fast forward to today with artificial intelligence, you see that same thing happening with AI. As amazing as ChatGPT is today, sometimes it gets stuff wrong. It hallucinates, and the technology requires a different, sort of way of thinking about how you solve user problems and so forth. And so you do see a lot of companies that have been resistant, reluctant, or simply don't even know how to apply the technology. And sometimes that happens even within a company. Like, I'll take Microsoft as a great example. They were pioneers in deploying artificial intelligence with Microsoft's GitHub Copilot tool. This was a tool that used artificial intelligence to help engineers program. And they had fabulous success with this. They've now rolled out this Copilot idea across their entire product portfolio. It's resulted in some unusual product decisions where they have Copilot for Windows to help you make your Windows computer more secure. It's actually kind of interesting technological work, but from a customer point of view, I just want my computer to be safe. I don't want to chat with it to figure out what tweaks and knobs I need to do to make it safe. Just make me a freaking safe computer.
So, Alex, do you think that's a little bit like, and to use another Clayton Christian analogy, that Microsoft haven't found that killer app? They're going to put the technology out there, hope people have that imagination and how to use it without it making it really do a job well.
Right. And, I'll give full credit to Microsoft. A lot of smart people there. So it's not like they're unaware of Clayton Christensen. As I said, I was there for quite a long time. They fully understand it, but you've got a couple of billion people using Windows. So it's very hard to go completely reinvent the user experience there. And so how do you introduce something new that's disruptive to that existing paradigm? So it's a very hard challenge. Clayton Christensen's seminal work before he passed away was trying to answer this question. The theory that he had is something he calls jobs to be done. The idea of jobs to be done is rather looking at the any sort of technology or capability in terms of the features, the facts and figures, the number of blinky lights, the megahertz, the whatevers. You look at instead the customers and you say, what job are they trying to get done? A famous example is Microsoft Zune versus the Apple iPod. I was at Microsoft at the time we were doing the Zune, and I remember a lot of the executive meetings we had on that. And we went and looked at this and said, gosh, Apple is selling a lot of iPods. This is now 20 plus years ago. And we're like, there's a big market there, right? Selling a ton of these things. So we did what most people would expect you would do in sort of a good business theory, good MBA 101 type work. We went out and talked to customers and said, hey, what's missing from the iPod? What would you like? And we got very consistent results where people wanted an iPod that was in color and they wanted an FM radio player.
Yeah.
And, we sort of sat around in Microsoft and to oversimplify a whole bunch, like, well, you got a bunch of money in the bank. Let's go make one. Well, let's make it color and let's put in an FM radio player. And if you ever had the opportunity to use the Microsoft Zune, it was actually a very, very fun device, right? It's colorful. It had some of the best user interface work Microsoft had done at the time. So it was a great device that was really well executed. But from a business perspective, it was a flop. And the reason it was a flop was at the time that we launched, the iPod market started cratering because streaming music was taking over. And don't quote me on this, but some of the streaming vendors were reportedly getting 90,000 signups a day at the time that we were launching the Zune player. So at the time that we finally had our competitor to the iPod, that whole market was cratering and streaming was taking off. And when you look at it from the lens of Clayton Christensen's jobs to be done theory, the market wasn't iPods. We were very wrong to go look at this from the point of view of, let's go add an FM radio player. That was a missing Pri 2 feature from the iPod, absolutely. But the customer job was set a mood with music, right? And so when you think of it as set a mood with music, it's because you're working out and need something energetic. Right. You're on a drive and need to chill. You're hosting a dinner party and want some ambient background music, whatever the occasion is, you want to set a mood. And these days I use Spotify. A lot of, streaming music is basically taken over because all you have to do is hit play. And if you want to change the mood, you go to the Spotify workout list and hit play on that. And then you get the energetic music. And so if you think about the iPod and Zune and all that, you had to rip your CDs to your PC, put everything up in your iTunes app, and then you had to create a playlist. Then you had to sync your playlist to your device. That was not easy. Well, it was better than where I started as a kid, where I had my milk crate of LP records. Yeah. So better than that, but not as good as streaming. We're in this phenomenal transition now of these AI technologies, but the technology is still a little rough around the edges, right? Because not quite perfect all the time. You really need to know your context. You really got to apply some innovation and creative thinking to what is the right user experience for it, what is the right way to apply the technology. You basically need your streaming app experience, not a Zune. And most people are building a Zune.
Supply side and demand side problem, we're builder versus user side. We talked about the Microsoft Copilot example, where Copilot's kind of put in all the Microsoft products, but people might, they just want a secure computer. They might not know how to use Copilot the right way, or it might not be intuitive to everyone. And then you talk about the build side, where you've got people who are building applications, right? And thinking about how they can use AI to build new applications. You have a take on which of those is maybe harder today in terms of bigger challenge of adoption?
That's a great question. Almost always you want to start with the user side, because if the people who are your intended customers can't figure out what you're trying to do, it really doesn't matter how fancy the underlying tech
Yeah.
is. If it's just too complicated, then it's just not going to work. And, you can look at just, let's set AI aside, look at the rise of, companies like Pipedrive, Monday.com, or Notion. These are all in some way or another Salesforce competitors, right?
Yeah.
If you're just a regular human in the world, say starting up a company and you want to use a CRM, I challenge any normal human to figure out what the heck Salesforce is doing. And like, you need to be the, you know, rocket scientist to figure out Salesforce. I'm not saying Salesforce is a bad product, and for what it does, it's it's a very capable product. But already you see a lot of competition of folks who have said make it simpler. And what I predict we're going to predict with some confidence because I know it's being worked on. In a sense, nobody really wants a CRM. A CRM, when you think about it, is kind of a crazy paradigm, because what you do want to do is track your customers. When you have a call with a customer, you want to have all the information about them fresh in mind. If you're talking to a customer, you want to know the follow-ups. Do they ask for additional specifications or details? Do they ask for a contract? But, 'cause you might have, a successful sales call, you're going to have some follow-up. So it actually is a lot of information that you need to have. But I've yet to meet a salesperson who wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I get to do today? I get to go to Salesforce and type in all my notes from all these meetings.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to do that. So Salesforce ends up having a bunch of imperfect data in it. And then as a manager, and I've spent quite a bit of my career as a manager, we go ask the CRO, hey, how are your sales leads looking? What's the pipeline look like? And go try to pull up a Salesforce report. And invariably it's wrong, because the good salespeople are kind of too busy to put everything in there. And so you get this garbage in, garbage out problem.
Yeah.
So when I say CRM is kind of a crazy tool, because it's not really today helping the salesperson the way it should. It's not really helping the managers the way it should, because the whole paradigm of making the salespeople do extra work is wrong.
Yeah.
But now
It is,
imagine your little AI, that little bug in the ear, or the agent that's on your Zoom call, it's listening in, it's taking the notes for you, it's helping you with the follow-ups, it's reminding you in a real time way, oh, hey, Chris, you and I met last year, and whatever. So, that kind of AI agent that's effectively whispering in your ear and taking care of all the busy work for you and helping you be more effective.
Well, Alex, it seems like a lot of the
experience, but that's not typing into some list of contacts,
Yeah. Well, bigger picture, it seems like a lot of the SaaS applications really started off, like Salesforce, for example. It started off as that system of record, right? With all like getting data in, editing data, maintaining data, and then some workflows kind of built on top of it. Do you see, is there anything fundamentally different about this sort of AI wave of innovation, where systems of action might be the more dominant paradigm?
I love that phrase. I haven't heard the system of action phrase, but that's a brilliant one, Chris. I think that'll be the winning paradigm, because no matter what your business is, whether you're farming or you're a construction company building office buildings, or you're a software company, doesn't matter what your business is. Ultimately, your reason to exist is to deliver some good or service, or some goods and services combined, to your customers. And everything else behind the scenes is, attacks is maybe not the right word, but to the
Maybe
degree
it
that,
is, right? It's overhead.
maybe it is, but everything that's not in service of your customers, can that be done automatically for you? Right? Like I said, all my 9 companies and all the boards and other stuff I've been involved in over the years, I've yet to have a customer tell me, you know what, Alex, we're going to buy from you because we are so glad you use QuickBooks Online. It doesn't happen. Nobody cares, right? They do care that my company is solvent. They do care that that we're ethical and we're not.
You invoice them for the right amount.
But it totally doesn't matter whether I'm using Salesforce or what. To the degree that we have tools and these new AI innovations that let me service my customers faster and more capably at lower costs, those are going to be the ones. We can call it the system of action, system of service, system of automation. It's definitely an opportunity to rethink that. With maybe the one exception of financials probably still need to be a system of record because the government gets run ornery if your taxes are incorrect.
And customers want their bank accounts to not be hallucinations.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about early in the conversation about how customers want to interact, the interface, right? What can AI, we think about designing AI to be truly user-friendly, open up in terms of interface being talk, text, phone, typing, having the most efficient, meet you where they are and most. What does that open up?
I think it opens up a lot of new user interactions. For those of you that are science fiction fans listening into this podcast, I mean, we're finally at the stage of the Star Trek voice activated computer being a reality. We had Apple Siri for a while, but going back to our disruptive innovations, Siri was a little goofy. It didn't always work well. I would encourage everybody, if you haven't already, to try ChatGPT's voice mode. And if you tried it some months ago, try it again. The new version is absolutely phenomenal. And so it's literally like a conversation. Another person happens to be an expert in whatever topic you're thinking of. When I'm driving somewhere, I'm stuck in traffic, or if I'm cooking or doing dishes or something where I can't be at my computer and typing, I'll just turn on the ChatGPT voice mode and start having a conversation about whatever topic I'm interested in. And it'll have very interactive, natural sounding conversation. And then it remembers everything, so I can then apply that. And we're seeing this sort of natural voice interaction being something that is going to become more and more prevalent in the software development space. Cursor, for example, leading software development tool platforms, which is a brand new company, I think less than 2 years old, just completely been on this hyper growth trajectory. They recently, I think yesterday, just launched their capabilities where you can interact with these programming tools from your phone. So now you can have software developers programming on their phones while doing something else instead of just being at their desks. And so you now have a completely new paradigm for working that just didn't exist before for this type of engineering work. I think we're going to see the same kind of thing. Not to spill the beans on anything we might be working on together, Chris, but you might see the same thing in the whole area of order processing, the stuff we're doing. A lot of scenarios in which the customer might need to get some parts and materials, like if you're on a construction site, if you could just call somebody up and ask for it, it automatically happened. That might be a lot easier and quicker interaction for those cases where you have staff members and team members out in the field, right, where it might be inconvenient to try to get to a traditional PC and go to a browser. There's a lot of opportunity for voice and all healthcare. I want my doctor taking care of me, not typing on the computer. If you have that sort of voice interaction bug in the ear, I also want my doctor to know my whole history.
It seems like one of the really important things that AI can do is having effectively unlimited expertise with context on the go, right? So you don't have to sit there and look up physical catalogs or reference books or sit there and look at multiple screens on a computer at your desktop, right? It can almost act like a human expert, but be right in your pocket.
Exactly. And you said the magic word in this, Chris, and that's context. OpenAI and Thrv, Google, and others have done amazing work in building out frontier models, the base AI systems. These base AI systems have general knowledge about the world, medicine, construction, software programming, and so forth. What they don't have built in is the context of your business. Oh, hey, I'm building this new office tower for it, and they've got these requirements for this office tower. I'm a doctor, and Alex is a patient. Here's his medical history. I'm trying to take one of these voice orders. The AI will understand the voice, but if you're keep with a construction example, you might have 20 different kinds of sheetrock,
Yeah.
and just saying a 4-inch pipe doesn't help you. You need a galvanized pipe, a PVC pipe, a rubber pipe. I mean, there's another 40 different types of 4-inch pipe. So understanding all the different requirements of a particular project, that's all the context that really makes a difference between a successful use of AI or, for lack of a better phrase, a glorified Google search.
Exactly. And yeah, it's the great example of, if you're a job site that, the 4-inch pipe, if you're talking to a human who's a pro, they can ask you, they either know you because they know it's your business, they know what kind of project you work on, or they ask you what kind of job site it is or what use it's for. And those kind of questions, again, a human expert could do. And boom, they know exactly what the right product is. There's no catalog, no lookup. And I think that's where AI is or will be soon.
Yeah, that's where AI is going to be soon, but that's the next wave of innovation in software companies, right? So I fully expect our sort of B2B companies going to like what we do at the private equity side. There's going to be room for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of software companies that are building out these solutions that really understand particular customers, particular industries, and particular workflows. You can use the base language model technology. If you want a simple analogy, we're having this conversation in English. So now we have a system that knows how to do a conversation in English. But just because we have a conversation in English doesn't mean that I know the specifications and parts requirements for building office towers for a particular client. And that's the opportunity for B2B SaaS companies to evolve into.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a very interesting conversation with Alex, really insightful. And maybe one last question I'd leave our audience with today is, if we talk about innovation, we talked about disruption, we talked about most companies have a hard time making that leap. What's some advice for companies out there to make sure they get on the happy side of their S-curve and really crush it when it comes to innovation?
That's a great question to leave on. And I want to introduce one new topic. So the first lever to pull to not be caught by this disruption is really understanding your customers, such as the Clayton Christensen jobs to be done, because that lets you understand what are your customers trying to do in a technology invariant way. And once you understand that, then you can ask the question, okay, does any of this new technology help me solve that customer need for better, cheaper? That's lens one. Then topic two is more organizational. And this is how you can avoid the challenge of, well, what about your existing 1 billion customers? And it's a technique, goes by a lot of different names. You can call them skunkworks teams, labs, higher teams. Over the years, folks have used a lot of different things, but the fundamental idea is similar. You want to carve out a set of folks who are your top talent, your forward thinkers, who are very comfortable dealing with ambiguity and the unknown and learning all the time. Then you set these folks aside to run as fast as they can at solving that customer. For example, at Microsoft, when we made the Xbox, we created a whole new division for it. And to make sure that they had the room to innovate and build a video game machine versus a personal computer, we sort of Microsoft, they got a lot of money, they built them a new campus. So not only was it a separate team, they got to be in a separate campus about 5 miles down the road. So close to come visit, but not so close that they didn't have room to innovate and do their own thing. And so, Microsoft's Xbox is a very different experience, from the user interface or the programmatic tools, very, very different than Windows. And that was deliberate because we were trying to solve a different problem. solve the gaming console, or the job to be done of entertain me quickly and easily.
Yeah.
What I would recommend for folks is, if you have an existing business, don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. Right? Take a fresh look at what are your customers really trying to do, and then set up an independent team to solve that problem. Only once you have that solution, you can look and say, does this need to be an entirely disruptive thing? Microsoft doesn't sell DOS anymore, as Windows disrupted it. And that might be the answer. It might be the answer that your existing technologies are not relevant anymore in this new world. Or you can evolve it and put it in very successfully. The answer will vary depending on what your company is doing, the products, the nature of the customer needs. But don't try to solve that up front. First, solve what can you do for your customers. Once you solve that, then you look back and say, how do I move my existing business forward?
Right. That brings it all back around. We said earlier, which is the most important thing, is to get that user experience, that user outcome right. So it's anchoring in them and then using technology.
Exactly. It's always about solving a customer problem. It's not about adding a chat UI just because you can. The chat UI actually solves a customer problem.
Well, it's a fantastic way to end on, Alex. Always bring it back to customer value, and always a pleasure. Thanks for a great wide-ranging conversation on innovation and some really practical tips for companies to get started and really drive the outcomes that AI can do for them.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Chris, and thank you everybody for listening.